Before we get into time travel, I just wanted to mention one thing. So, the reason why I say that if the MiHoYo servers were to shut down, Honky wouldn't necessarily go away, or like our accounts wouldn't necessarily go away, our bubble universes wouldn't necessarily go away, is because they've existed, right? And they will be there forever. Even if a bubble universe were to be popped, per se, and destroyed, it'll disintegrate into trillions upon trillions upon trillions of little pieces that still exist. Right? When a computer hard drive gets wiped and all of its data is deleted, that doesn't really go anywhere, does it? And the reason I say that is because you know that old saying where if you don't want something on the internet that could be used against you later in the future, don't put it on there because the internet basically holds all of this information permanently. That holds true. Okay? When you put, say, a picture of yourself onto the internet, you're not just putting it onto the internet. Google is taking that photo. Other companies are taking that photo. So even if you were to delete the photo off of your phone and actually say delete it from the internet, it's not completely deleted from the internet. Somebody has archived it. Somebody has put it onto their server or onto their PC. That little piece has never truly been deleted. Right? Now, in terms of, say, downloading a Minecraft world, you remember the thing that I was talking about with Sela, where she was kind of in the same bubble universe, quote unquote, but like things were kind of changing? It's kind of also like that. Say if I were to put my Honky Impact account onto the internet for people to download, right? You would all download it, but then different things would start to happen to each bubble universe. The bubble universe has now split up, right? And this right here directly goes into time travel that I'm going to mention, and I'll probably have to add in a little bit of another part after I'm done with it, because this directly goes into time travel, right? But before we get into time travel, basically what I'm saying is that even if you were to delete something, it's never truly deleted. If a universe were to get entirely destroyed, it's never truly destroyed. It just gets broken up into millions of pieces. Whether those pieces form into another bubble or not just depends. Right? And it's important to keep this in mind. Anyways, let's move on to time travel. So, for time travel, we often say that if you were to go back in the past and say, kill Hitler before he starts World War II, you would alter the course of events, correct? But what if you don't go into the same universe when you travel in time? See, the way wormholes work and the way portals work, right? For example, like say if you go through the teleporter on COD Zombies, you are basically, say, taking the palm of my hand and bringing in, say, Venus right next to each other, right? But they aren't right next to each other, are they? No. They're kilometers apart. Thousands of kilometers apart. Say if you wanted to travel from the sun to the edge of the solar system, that's a light year. But if you had a portal, you could get to the edge of the solar system in a mere second. This is why in Star Trek, for example, It's called warp. You're warping from one space to another. That's why you see the stars in kind of a weird way, because you're basically taking one edge of space and linking them together. Now, imagine doing this to universes, where you take one universe, one end, and link them together, and then you travel between the two universes. But because the two universes have kind of a different time scale, you think you traveled back in time, but you really didn't. Okay? So then you alter the course of history of this universe, and then when you go to travel back to the present, you think you traveled back to the present, but you just traveled to yet another universe. This is the exact same thing as Captain's Bizarre Adventure. He travels from universe to universe. It's hard to get to a universe if you don't have the means to travel to another universe. That's why it's so rare to be able to get to another universe, because you have to have the means. Just like you have to have the means to be able to go from the Milky Way galaxy all the way to Andromeda. There's no theory of relativity if you can travel there in mere seconds without having to travel at the speed of light. The maximum speed is the speed of light, but no one said you can't use a portal. Right? So, in a sense, if you were to go back and quote unquote change time, would you really be changing time? Likely not. Because the only way you can really time travel in your own universe is by going back to the center of the bubble. They say before we continue to the next part, there's something I kind of wanted to mention. So, we all know that we're living in a 3D dimensional world. That's not really entirely true, is it? There is a fourth dimension. You have your space dimensions, which is basically, your X, Y, and Z coordinates. But then you also have time. Now, I know scientists have always thought of the idea of being able to travel through this fourth dimension. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's as easy as traveling through space. You see, because of you being able to bend space as easily as, say, a black hole could, or even a wormhole, you could easily think you traveled through time, but in actuality, you just traveled through space universes apart. Okay? Where you end up in an entirely different universe that you end up changing the course of history of. Because you're there and you just killed somebody who started the Holocaust, right? But the history would change for that universe. Okay? So then you go to travel back to the present. Do you really travel back to the present? Or did you go, say, the same direction that you just went and found another bubble universe that had that quote-unquote change? You see, because when you make a change in the universe, you could possibly break it apart. Right? Imagine a single cell, a single blood cell. When it divides basically into two clones of each other. But do they have the same course of history? No. One day you might get cut, and then one of those clones drips out. The blood cell dies, but its clone is still living. Okay? So say in one universe, like this one, I don't get a girlfriend, for example, correct? This universe now breaks apart. So you have two clones of me not having a girlfriend. In one of these clones, I happen to get a girlfriend, and in the other, I don't. So when you go to travel, quote unquote, back through time to right before Hitler started the Holocaust. You kill Hitler, but at that point, the bubble universe has already broken into two separate pieces. Okay? And then when you kill Hitler, it once again breaks into two separate pieces. So the bubble is like continuously breaking into multiple different forms of the same universe. This is why, for example, when Sele was running through that same bubble universe, she kept getting thrown back. Because she kept getting thrown back to the events before the bubble universes that she was in. It was the same bubble universe, quote unquote, but it was broken up into a bunch of different pieces that all had the same start point, but didn't continue in the same light. This is the reason why you're able to create, say, a new Borderlands playthrough, but get an entirely different weapon. They all have the same start point, but they don't have the same course of events, per se, right? You get a different weapon on this playthrough. You get instead of getting a gold weapon, you get a purple weapon, right? So, do you necessarily travel through time or just through space? Right? Now, keep in mind about Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay? You know how sometimes you'll have that slow day, quote unquote, and then sometimes you'll have that fast day, quote unquote? That's relative to you. In terms of time itself, 24 hours went by on Earth. The Earth itself aged another 24 hours. But what about you? Did you age faster or slower? Do we really live 100 years? We live about 100 years. But what if humans had exactly 100 years to live? But because of the theory of relativity and how days go by faster for some of us, we die sooner. And for those of us where the days go by slower, or no, I got that reversed. For those that the days go by faster, you end up living to your 120s because the day went by faster. You didn't age as much as somebody else. However, for those of us that age slower, in terms of the ones that are aging faster, you might die in your 80s because every day was much longer for you, right? I mean, because that's how I can kind of picture the theory of relativity. Now, according to Einstein, when you travel at the speed of light, you're essentially like stopping time in a way. This kind of makes sense, especially when you look at something like a black hole, because a black hole has so much gravity. And if you know how gravity works, gravity is basically just warping space and time. Notice that, right? If we ever were to able harness the power of gravity, we might actually be able to travel through time, because gravity can alter space and time in a way. But even so, time is still moving forward, even for the black hole. The time is never really moving backwards. The only way you'd ever really be able to travel through time is if you can figure out how to get time to move forward or backwards quicker. But keep in mind, technically speaking, it's still relative to yourself. Your life goes back 20 hours, but that's just the world going back 20 hours, not yourself. See, if you were to make a time machine to travel 2,000 years into the past, would you actually travel 2,000 years into the past? Probably not, because it's all relative to yourself. You would see all these bubble universes in a different light, yes, but you've only traveled 2,000 years into the past relative to yourself. This fourth dimension isn't as easy to travel through as is space. Right? Space is a little bit more linear, it's expansive, it's expanding, and you can easily travel from universe to universe. But for time, not so much. right? It's confusing to look at and to question, but and, we can all have our different thought processes on it. And it would be nice to be able to travel through time one day, with the exception of possibly having time change. But it's like this, right? If time travelers exist, how come time doesn't change for us? If somebody actually went back in time and killed Hitler, which somebody obviously did, say 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years from now, somebody gains access to time travel, but we never see time and its events actually change. Because the moment you alter the course of history, the universe breaks apart. And you end up having the original universe with its original course of history, and then this new universe. The only person that had time change for them was the one that had time relative to themselves. Interesting, right? I just want you all to think about that as we finish up the remainder of this little video here. Time to continue that little cliffhanger I left off with.